Hello, this is the Harboring Light. I'm Mary. I give a conservative perspective about the world around me. Feedback is immensely important. Feel free to reach out to me. Email is best, but YouTube always works. Okay, so word of mouth also works, and I appreciate all listeners. And if you feel somebody would be very interested in the content that I offer, go ahead and share it. Tell them about the Harboring Light. Okay, so on to the business and on to the next business and the topic of choice. As I mentioned on Monday, I'm continuing out my thoughts on the cookbook entitled 100 Best Chefs. This particular book is from the 90s into the 2010s. All right. So now this part is focusing in on the book itself. I'm going to make my thoughts about the particular chefs that were featured in the decades, going to the specifics about, give more commentary about that. And also I'm going to give aspects about particular recipes that I found to emphasize what they have given to change the aspects of the culinary landscape. All right, with all that said, let's dive in and dig in, really, more so to say. Here we go. Okay, so let's start out with Thomas Keller. So this is the chef that was initially the first chef on the list. Now, I'm going to revise myself as a way. Now, I'd say the 90s because it's more in the fact of the linear aspects of chefs in this book. There's chefs that it goes more and more along the line of that decade, but there are chefs that are featured from the more of the latter part of the 80s. All right, so Thomas Keller, he was coined with the title of Best Chef in 88. And his gifts to the culinary world is giving a lot of eloquence to, as you can deem it, everyday foods or, not so fancy foods there would be like fried chicken or something like that. So what are my thoughts on this here? So I find it really interesting in the aspects of food when it comes to things like this example here. Because those pinpoint a lot to the reason and understanding also about what does everyday foods mean and what does it mean when it's rethought of in more of a prestigious atmosphere. I say that it's one of those things, to no qualms to Thomas Keller. It's one of those things where, let's say you want to present something that's ordinary, and you you dress it up to see how people will perceive it. And I really appreciate chefs that understand that normal everyday foods, even like sandwiches, like it's interesting with how sandwiches came to be it came out of the aspects of being in a crunch, you don't have much to work with, trying to feed somebody, throwing stuff together, making sure it's presentable enough for I believe it was I don't know if it was a king of France. I have to get back on that, but it was royalty, to say the least. And voila, here you go. And so that's nice to know that he put that in the consciousness of understanding that you shouldn't really be persnickety or pretentious, when it comes to what to take from ordinary food, what it can, how it can evolve itself. All right, so let me dive into some of the recipes that I would like to try, and I'll give you the reasons why. So, particularly what I find interesting is on page 14, excuse me. And I think that's very unique with quinoa. And the recipe is entitled Toasted Quinoa Porridge with Black Trump Mushrooms. Why do I find this interesting? All right, so quinoa is already something that is more health conscious. Now, porridge in itself, as far as the aspects, that's another thing of lineage that is considered a food that is for either the Oliver Twist days, for just gruel, just to give slop to people who are underprivileged, or it's not a fine dining food. It wouldn't necessarily be considered that, right? And so when you merge quinoa and you have the phrase quinoa porridge and with trumped mushrooms, that merges the worlds together between class and fine dining and ordinary foods, and how it can be presented and what you can think about, and changing again the process of what ordinary foods can bring to the table. And I personally like quinoa isn't for everybody. I think it's all in the way that you take the prep time and all of that to get it right. And me personally, I think that breakfast is one of the most important meals of the day. And I would say at least trying to eat something for breakfast to offset the whole thing with what you eat from day to day, as far as the aspects of hunger and storing fat and all these kind of things. So that's just my opinion about that. So that's why I find this particular recipe quite interesting and I would want to try. All right, so moving on here. Okay. Let's see. Okay, good. And then also with the aspects of as I mentioned again, that I enjoy cooking, but baking is really something top notch to me. And I also find interesting the recipe that's on page 18, and I would want to try with the vanilla pudding and shortbread, because shortbread also has that quaint history of being very modest beginnings, and then the flavor, especially when you shortbread in itself, the flavor palette of that is really quite interesting and very comforting, and that's the whole idea of it, because most of the time when you think about shortbread cookies, it's associated with something like comfort in the winter, stuff like that. And if you add extra layers to it, like honey or something like that, and it's just and then the butter and depending on what you take away, what you put into it, it's really good. Okay. Now I'll do my best to pronounce his name. So he is Japanese chef here, and he was reigned best chef in '89, Nobu Masatasha. And what he has done in giving to the aspects of the culinary world, he's changed the thought process of how sushi is. He changed the thought process of how sushi is presented, and merging different flavor palettes to tongue tied here, to the world of sushi, right? So, what we see today and what we think of the day, we can give credit, right, to Nobu. And it really makes a lot of sense for this to become well into its own in the late '80s, onto the '90s, because that was the period of time which people were reinventing themselves in the aspects of cultural values and foods, and then looking for new ways of health foods, new ways of being more cutting edge and stuff, and figuring these things out. And it makes a lot of sense for Nobu to come into his own at that time. And for instance, if I did, y'all, you all who enjoy sushi, give me a shout out or email me with your thoughts about the aspects of the fusion of sushi now, and what you see in sushi restaurants now. But anyhow, I'm merely speaking from a Texas point of view here. The thing is that with the palette of being hot and savory, I see that a lot with sushi here in Texas. And then also with the aspects, I live more near the Gulf Coast. And so, having more of that seafood, and that it is seafood, but more of a different interpretations, adding on to the palette of sushi and how it's thought of being cooked versus raw, and all these kind of assorted things with it. All right, so particularly the recipe that I find interesting that I would want to try is on page 22, and it's the sea scallops. I like scallops a lot because it has more of a undertone of it's a mixture in between meat, more savory and more meaty. Like you eat, if it's as if you're eating. What's the best way to describe this? Some kind of maybe beef, sort of. It's a savory flavor, but it's very light, airy, and that's I like. I like food like that to just give you surprises within it. So that's the recipe I would want to give a try. Along with I like cod, and also I would want to try the beef tenderloin with the Latin spices, because as I mentioned again, beef, fish, really, yeah, it's the savoriness of the beef that I really enjoy, and the something I'm more prone to there. All right, so moving on. Okay, Nancy Silverton. Now, Nancy Silverton, she was ranked as best new chef in 1990, and what she did in her contributions to the culinary world was how changing the thought process of bread. Now, so actually good bread. And that's very interesting because, when you go into the supermarket now and then you see a variety, of choices that you could get overwhelmed, but that is the surplus of living in a free market here. And I find that quite interesting with the aspects of good bread. So now I'm giving my interpretations of it because to me it is the aspects of the problems with that comes along the lines with process, the chemicals in the process of I guess you get look at it from this point of view, synthetic bread, not natural, bread that you would deem as organic, when organic within itself is something as simple as getting it freshly made or foreign made or something like that, right? And so she wanted people to understand there's a better way with how to think about bread and preparing it instead of just having your body used to processed food. And then that is interesting with this in itself because when the body is used to eating things that aren't really naturally good for it, it starts to change the chemistry in which you operate, right? And you see this unfortunately now with how what that led to, with the aspects of, obesity and all these kind of issues, right? And also mentally, it changes your chemistry too, where when you're always feeling like you don't want to crave junk all the time, you don't feel so good, and so you have more of a negative disposition about things, and it's just a snowball effect here that some people don't really realize, and it's quite interesting that she was getting that and into the awareness about how food and that balance of everything is very important. All right, so let's see some of the main foods but let me get into what I would want to try here. That's what I'm getting at. I would want to try, because I'm not particularly kale. That it's just it's hard for me, and then particularly kale is one of those things I understand. I have to be mindful and careful of as far as keeping the balance with my thyroid. Because as I mentioned this before in other previous podcasts, I found out I had a thyroid condition when I was about 19. And there's certain vegetables and things that can activate that. So kale is one of them. So, but it just has I guess it's the acidity of it or something. It's not favorable to me. So anyway, I would want to try the on page 36 of the book, the antipasto salad, because I like the aspects of the type of green green olives. I really enjoy green olives because it has that very tart taste that can bring a lot of flavor to some, especially when you mix it in with other vegetables and then cheeses, and it just works really well together. So that's why I would be more inclined and try a recipe like that. All right, so moving on. Okay, so let's get into talking about Tom. Now I'll do my best to pronounce his name. Okay, so Cola Ocho. I'll do my. I'm trying my best here. All right, he was ranked best chef in '91, and particularly with there's a documentary with him. Let me pull that up right quick. And let's see. A place at the table. All right. So it's available on different platforms. I think it's available on. Let me see. Let me pull them up right quick. It's on pretty much all the different. You can find it. Amazon, YouTube, Tubi, Pluto. If you're interested in watching it. So essentially, it's interesting with chefs like him. He is not only is he well renowned with Top Chef and all these kind of things and his contributions with that, but he's also a chef that understands the importance of giving back. Now, I don't particularly agree with the Obama administrations and the things that they have done and everything else like this. But I do appreciate the initiative that Michelle Obama did, even if it was, for heirs or what have you. The intention is decent. And so he was a part of the initiation of that back in 2010 to understand and activate that it's important to reform school lunches. And so, yes, that is something very important to understand in the consciousness of children and hunger and their success in school. Because if a child is not fed nutritious meals and they are not fed properly, they won't be able to focus and they will not be successful and not be able to prosper in school. And I find that quite remarkable that he wanted to be a part of that initiative. Okay, so that's good. All right, so some of the recipe that I would want to try, particularly that I think is quite interesting, is the aspects of marmalade. Okay, so why do I find this quite interesting? Because it reminds me of the aspects of the traditional way of doing things and preserving. All right, so when my grandmother was alive, I would see her do things like, the process that she went through, that she did, and she showed me and she taught me about how to make preservatives and jams and jellies, and just the prep work that it takes into it and everything else is really a work of art. So I find that quite interesting, and I would be more inclined to try a recipe of that measure means. Okay, and I find that the red pepper jelly, that's quite interesting too. That's another one too I would want to try on page 48. Alright, so moving on here. Okay, so Eric Rippert, he was ranked best chef in 92. Alright, so known as a seafood chef. Wow, there's so many things that I can comment and say about seafood. I am very inclined to, I really enjoy seafood. Seafood in itself is one of those things where me personally, I don't think you can ever get tired of it because it's always something, there's a lot of variety in it. And then it's balanced itself with health and everything else. And it's just really good and nice. And excuse me, just a minute. Alright, so I'm going to take myself right on. If you hear a little bit more noise, forgive me, I'm outside in my backyard. So, here you go along with me. Okay, so, Alright, so, yeah, I gotta get all this together here. Okay. Okay, so, as I was saying here, it's a lot to choose from. And that can be part of the issue a lot with eating healthy, for one, having variety and wanting to stick to it, versus the affordability of it too. And that's one of the things too with it, but it's nice. I don't know. I'd say also that too with the argument. Well, it's hard to eat healthy because of when you think about the affordability. But there's ways in which to make that work, even if you're on a budget. So it's just one of those things that you see it. There's if you want to do. I just have that mentality. If you want to do it, you'll be more inclined to figuring out how to make that work for you. All right, so with that said, moving on to this particular recipes that I would find quite interesting, and I would be very interested in trying myself here. Okay, so particularly tuna, I would be seared tuna, page 52. I'd be interested in trying that. Because especially when you think about sushi, and then also with you don't have to cook it for too long, and also with the aspects of how naturally it even raw in the instance of medium to rare is quite flavorful, and that's nice. As far as cooking and preparing things here. And I would also want to try the strip bass with mango and pickled ginger salad. I like that. Me personally, I'm more of a person that's very interested in the aspects of how the flavor palette works, and the ingredients that are in it, and how those things merge together, and then what you can add in and what you can take away with something, how that changes how the food tastes. And so that's something that I would want to give a try here. Alright, so with that said, I'm going to move on to Nancy Oates. Now, Nancy Oates is she got the reign of being best new chef in 93. Alright, so particularly with her, she she became her own in San Francisco. Now, San Francisco is very interesting in the aspects of culinary foods. And culinary and dining, just like the aspects of Portland. They are more, hip, and then Seattle, hip, edgy, and all this stuff kind of things. And the political structure is not so very good, but I give them credit for the aspects of I give these cities credit to the aspects of what the contributions that they have given with changing and implementing the aspects of how modern food can be thought about, right? So I'll give them that. All right. So what she did is make comfort food more sophisticated, because I can see that where when you think about comfort, when it's depending on the region and everything else, it can be complacent with the aspects of how certain foods are presented as comfort food, and especially with the aspects of being very heavy and hard to digest and all the stuff. When you think about everything that is in it, and because those comfort foods are typically things that you eat every so often. It's not something you should eat every day. And so that's interesting when a chef comes along and says, well, you know what, I want to make it more sophisticated and let me see what I can do about it. And then most of the things that she has done, as far as changing the palate, is quite interesting too. All right, so what are some of the one particular that I find interesting and that I would really want to try and do, and I think it's a very good example of this, of how it is very clear what that means about sophisticated comfort food. I think this is a really good example of it. Shared scallop with cranberry beans, clams, and pork. The pork. So, why is that interesting? Now, it's interesting to me because these things are typically, especially with the pork and the beans and all those are typically seen as foods that are more for just everyday. They're not very fancy. And when you merge them together with scallops and cranberries and clams, that raises the tier for it to be more of a culinary experience, to where it gives it more of an extra edge, and that's nice, and I appreciate chefs that understand that. All right, so and I might want to try the recipe on page 68 with the squash and Nero. Might want to try that too. Now, this guy is particularly interesting because his restaurant is in Houston, right? That's where I'm from. And it's quite interesting because Houston, at one point in time, I don't know if it's still deemed that, but the foodie town. And that makes a lot of sense because I can occur for that. Growing up, there was a lot of very, 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 very flavorful restaurants out there to where, it was sort of like a amusement park of cuisines that you could choose from. Remember, growing up, for instance, little Nifas, going to restaurants like that, and then being able to eat from the list goes on of Greek. You have even certain parts with being able to try goat at one point, and all these kind of things growing up. It was quite interesting, and it was right at my doorstep. So let's dive into him. So he was Michael Korda, best chef in '94, and I will do my best to pronounce it because I believe this is a Brazilian name. Churrasco, and it's a high upscale Brazilian steak restaurant that is in Houston, and I think I saw one in, if I'm not mistaken, in Arlington and Dallas and stuff like that. Anyway, he is a testament of the aspects of how the Latin flavor is really infiltrated when it comes to fine cuisine, and particularly with meats. And that's what I find quite rich and interesting of what the contributions that has been giving and with the Latin culture and the American palate here, with the contributions of that. And when you change the way in which meats and traditional Latin foods are presented, that you're in for a treat. So the recipe I would want to try is the first on 72 with the red snapper and shrimp ceviche. Especially tongue time again. The ceviche, I find it's very light and airy, and then to merge it with shrimp and then all of that and red snapper, it gives it a palate to where it's very. I would say it might be a little more. I would equate the aspects of being more maybe. Or the buttery sort of nuttiness, maybe a little bit on that flavor palette, but I have to try and find out. So that's why I would be very interested in that one. I would be very interested in most of the recipes that he has to offer here. The pinto on the recipe on. And then going back to chorizo with her stuff, with Nancy Oates. That's why I find that interesting too, because chorizo is very infused with a lot of spice. Depending on if you get mild or a little bit spicier, and that's interesting. So and then I pretty much want to try most of his recipes here. So, and then also the tres leche. I can't stress that enough. How I feel with sweets. I'm particularly really prone to sweets. So I've the three milks, and then I like tres leche because it's very moist. You know, when it's done properly, it's really moist as far as the flavor, and it's a nice treat. Alright, so going on here. Alright, so I'm gonna go on to Annie Quarantino, and she was ranked best chef in '95. And then what she has done is she is New Southern Food Movement, right? So I find that interesting. New Southern food. Now, what does that mean, New Southern food here? Alright, so traditionally, Southern food was seen as something very associated with some very, very heavy foods. Essentially not too far off from what you would think about soul food, right? And so the coin New Southern Food, that means we want to say, hey, she's wanting to say, hey, it doesn't have to be this whole, particularly what you think about Southern food, like chicken and dumplings or something like that. Let's do something else with it. So I find that quite interesting. All right, some of the to start out with, one of the recipes I find very interesting is mixing olive oil with cake. Now, olive oil is a particular ingredient. If you don't do it right, it's very, very, pronounced in the food to where it's off-putting. So the fact that she took the time to see how that blends together, merges together, and something as that can be as unforgiving if you don't get it right with desserts, that's quite fascinating, and that's something that I would want to try. And again, with the aspects of black bass with potatoes and aioli, it's quite interesting. These things are interesting to think about as being, more sophisticated in the aspects of Southern food. And then again with jumbo brownies. Wow, quite nice. Now Barbara Lynch is interesting to me because she is one of those chefs that I understand you should be in your pursuit, your culinary pursuit. You should be aspire yourself to be a grab bag of things. So she wasn't pinpointing one specific venue of a culinary pursuit. She's a master of all. I mean, with that culinary phrase, she's jack of all trades. So her cuisine really represents that. Alright, so some of the recipes that I want to try from her, I would want to try the spring salad on 92. I want to try that, and then I'm more inclined with tomato. I would want to try the pasta on 94 here, and then also with meat, I would want to try the chevron's shellfish with stew. And the reason why I would want to try that is because it reminds me of paella. Now, paella is for traditionally, that kind of, people know that, but I'm just saying, just in jest, paella is traditionally seen as a Spanish dish, right? From what I understand. And the mixture of different things from you know, the seafood, okay, the rice, and then if I'm not mistaken, I think you can put certain cheeses and meats and everything. It's just a smorgasbord of flavor, and so I appreciate recipes like that. All right, so let's go on to Daniel Patterson. Daniel Patterson, who was ranked best chef in '97. And so he was all about the aspects of organic. He brought that into the worlds of foods of um, being more pushing the envelope, moving more towards natural raw foods. That's what, from what I gather, understand about him. All right, so with this said, the particular foods that I would want to try from him is the pepper soup on page 104, and let's see what else. And I would want to try the salsa verde with the new potatoes on 108. Okay, so. Michael Simon here, he was ranked best new chef in 98. Michael Simon, most people know him from Food Network, and then also with The Chew. And I think I like his very wittiness and his cancer that when he's presenting and talking about food, and you can tell that you can see that he really has a genuine love for food, and that's nice to know. And so, I like that he's more inclined into the savory sort of palettes of foods, and so he would be more interested in seeing what we can do with meats and things like that. Okay, so with that said, I am going to say something of me, what I would want to try 114 with bolognese. We'll want to try that. All right, and also with Greek style pork. That's interesting. All right, because pork and Greek, mixing those two worlds together, because traditionally with Greek foods is lamb that's associated with Greek, right? And so to have pork in the mix of that, how does that palate translate itself? And I would want to see how that turns out on page 116 here. Okay, all right. So no. Yeah. Alright. Ooh. My goodness. Let me get back. Alright, so John Best. I mentioned him on Monday. Okay, I'm going to mention him again. Now, John Best, with everything with him, being a TV chef here, but also with showcasing the contributions of Louisiana dining, especially getting New Orleans cuisines, right? Because there's a lot of rich history in the aspects of the contribution that's particularly that the city of New Orleans has given into the cuisine palette of America. And so, what I like that he has done is help to see there can be a lot of sophistication in the cuisine palettes of New Orleans. All right, so with that said, let's dive in here. So what I would want to try here is 102. I particularly like oysters. They're not for everybody, but I like the kind of the freshness, the snap. It's got a little snap to it there, And then to add in on that layer with garlic and butter, that would be really nice. And then also fish. Particularly I like snapper, so I would want to try that on 124. Let's see. And then I might want to try. Now, I'm not particularly a fan of figs, but I might want to try to see how that turns out with as far as dessert. All right, so Andrew Carmelini, new best chef in 2000. All right, 2000. I was in starting middle school here, and wow, the 2000s was really something else in the aspects of, cultural change shifts. All right, so what he wanted people to understand about food is you give appreciation to foods that are would typically be taken for granted. And that's nice to know, but when people get that you and that's also a nice tier to look at, a nice advice to look at as far as life goes too. You should never take anything for advantage, and just to have that sort of mentality all the way around. And it's nice when there's a chef that has that mentality towards food. All right, so with that said, I'm gonna see like for instance, scrambled eggs. People see scrambled eggs. Hey, it's the everyday thing. Scramble this up real quick, eat, go. All right, so but he says, well, you know what? Let's change that. Let's make it a culinary experience by this ingredient. So I would want to try this with the soft scrambled eggs with smoked sable fish and trout. I bet that's very interesting, because merging fish and eggs together is really good. All right. And then the asparagus, I like asparagus. And then to merge asparagus with curry and peanuts, I bet that's really interesting. And fava beans, because fava beans are pretty much considered something, every day, you eat with mashed potatoes and are like some kind of meat, and there you go. But to present it with prosciutto and mint, wow. Okay. Bolognese, I would want to try that. Pretty much everything. Okay. All right, so let's move on. 2001, Wally DeFrusny. This is interesting cat here, because he was one of the forerunners in the aspects of gastronomy, of what I was mentioning on Monday about the aspects of using chemistry and breaking down the molecules of food and deconstructing the deconstructing of it. All right. So with that said, I would want to try this recipe here, 142, with the deep fried, freeze dried palanita. That's quite interesting. All right, and that's what. And then it's got. I would pretty much like to try too with the root beer date puree, and infusing root beer and puree together. That as I mentioned again, there is an art form I greatly understand and see and think with preservatives. So yeah, that would be up my alley here. All right, so and that's on 148. All right, so moving on, 02, Grant. I'll do my best to pronounce his name. Achez. All right. So with Grant Achez, he says that, you know what? Why get out the mentality of using a fork for food to eat all the time. So he did very interesting things with playing with the idea that you don't necessarily need a fork to eat food, the main courses and things like this. So what I would want to try is 152, the hot potato, cold potato recipe. All right, and 154 PB&J recipe Capanese. Yeah. And then the sweet potato brown sugar bourbon, I would want to try that. And then there's this whole thing with the popcorn shooters, caramel popcorn shooters. It's very interesting, and it's cute too. All right, so Stuart Burasoa, 03 here. So what he did was, and then this is very interesting with the aspects of the American spirit. He wanted to change the ideas of dim sum, right, in San Francisco. Even though he's not, from what I understand, he's not of Asian descent. He wanted to have he has an appreciation for the cuisine. And so that's where that comes along with American foods. And when you see that Asian fusion becoming its own here. All right, so with that said, all right, so what would I want to try? No. I would want to try 168 with the sausage fried farro with the shiitake. I bet I would want to try that. It's quite interesting. Okay, so moving on. Graham Elliott, 04. Now, Graham Elliott, I found out about him through MasterChef with Gordon Ramsay. I'm watching that reality show. Now, Gordon Ramsay has a lot of issues. I don't know why. It's I mean, I get it, but it's one of those things. I don't know. Yeah, you know, just because they want to present you to be a certain way to get more of a name for yourself and reach the things that you did in America doesn't mean you should take it, but whatever, with Gordon Ramsay. But needless to say, Graham Elliott was on MasterChef, and the way in his contributions to be a judge on MasterChef was quite interesting, because he put that flair, sort of modern flair into what you think about, you know, what you wouldn't think about ordinary things, right, when it comes to food, or, you know, pushing, taking and encouraging the contestants to be very mindful of taking things to the next step, you know, with flair, with a certain flair, if you do it the right way. All right. So what I would want to try from him is on 176, the chicken with green beans. I would want to try that. And then also with the pork tenderloin. Good morning. I would want to try that with a pickled watermelon. See, that's taking something to the next step here. I would want to try that. Daniel Hum. Now, Daniel Hum is quite interesting because he in itself is the aspects of, you know, even though you have accolades in very sophisticated circles, yeah, that you he's a chef that says, well, what's next? That I want to constantly do something, constantly, be this, do this, read, because it's never enough. I have so much passion for what I like to do as a chef, and that's nice to know. So with that said, I would want to try the tomato garlic confit, because that's merging the I find it quite interesting with recipes like this when it comes to searing foods and how that's done, and that flavor palette that can contribute that with how it can change or to add or take away from something. Alright, so, and then also again, I would want to try the roasted peaches with tomatoes on 186 here. Alright, so David Chang. Now David Chang's an interesting fellow here, and I can't stress enough, me personally, I am very inclined into Asian dining, and the reason why I'm more inclined to Asian food is because there's a lot of variety to it. There's a lot of health variety to it, and there's a lot of the way in which most of the seasoning is very complex, but it's simple in most of the ways that it is done. And then his noodle bar, Mofu noodle bar in Manhattan, quite interesting. And then it's unfortunate the way in the state of New York is. New York was kind of a grab bag in itself, but the traditions of New York is very a testament of it's a testament of the American spirit. Because why? Because so many people came to America through Ellis Island and the pursuit of a better life for themselves, and really, when we get in the turn of the century and so forth, and that's just such a rich, flavorful history that started out in New York. And I can't stress enough too with the aspects of how that's a melting the ice with talking about foods that you like. And New York is one of those places where you have a lot to talk about, because there's so many things to think about and choose from and to consider and be a part of, when it comes to that. Alright, so with that said, I would personally like to try the lentil soup here on 194. And okay. And then also with the asparagus and the lettuce, I would want to try that one. With the bass, I would want to try that. Now, Gabriel Rucker, 07, he best new chef. Gabriel Rucker, Portland, Oregon. Now, as I said, Portland, Oregon is one of those cities that they changed the concepts of what can be thought about when it comes to modern food and urban and cool foods, I guess you can say, trendy, right? Hold on, sweetie. Why don't you get a banana for right now, okay? It's upstairs. Okay. Oh, okay. And so now Portland has a lot of issues with the aspects of political landscapes, structures where it's just, and let's be quite honest, not good, like a hellscape, as far as policies are involved, and that out trumps people who are there just to, I guess you could say like more traditional, but Portland, Oregon isn't really more traditional. It's more of a place for people who are more, counterculture. And so he was a part of that. Needless to say, that I personally find it. I mean, I'm a coffee person, right? And so Portland, Oregon, Seattle, New York, and cities like that, they really became its own with the aspects of that, merging that together. What can be thought of when it comes to coffee and coffee shops and something things like that. But he also did a lot. He's brought in a lot of contribution, the aspects of more savory and measuring health and everything else with him being a chef. Okay, so with this said, what I would want to try from him is the salmon poached and cinnamon butter. See how it's merging in that level, merging those palettes together, salmon and cinnamon. Quite interesting on 204 here. And the lemongrass chicken stew, I would want to try that on 206. And the veal, I would want to try that. Okay, Ethan Stoll is from Seattle, and as I mentioned, about the cool kind of trendy kind of cuisines here. He's part of that. All right, so foods that I would want to try, recipes that of his contributions. I would want to try the artichoke, because the artichoke, it's interesting when vegetables have a meaty flavor. So I would want to try that with the olive salad on 212 here. And moving on with the chickpea salad, I would want to try that, and raisin and lemon. Okay, I would want to try pretty much everything he has to offer, because that is really much of my alley. Even the garlic, rosemary, and pork roast, pork loin, I would want to try that. All right, Linton Hopkins, 09. Now he is a part of Atlanta, and a fresh local and Peachtree, and implementing the aspects of Peachtree Road Farmers Market. Buying local, being local, fresh ingredients all the way, and that's really nice when chefs understand that. Just locally grown, everything. All right, so. What I would want to try from him is, to start out with, is on 222, the sliced poached chicken, turnip mushrooms, and then I'm a fan of seafood, so I would want to try those clams there with the bourbon twist and the jalapeno. That's nice. Okay. I would want to try the pan roasted grouper with butter bean salad, right? Okay, Roy Cho 2010. Now this cat is interesting because he is all about food trucks. Now, let me tell you my personal thoughts about food trucks. So I was initially introduced with food trucks here is college, right? So U of H. There was food trucks out there, and I would say, oh, okay, that's interesting. So I would see this thing these phrases being thrown around with kimchi. I'm like, oh, so that's interesting. Merging Korean foods and all these kind of things. Okay, yeah, okay, that's something I want to try and get around to. But it was kind of hard because, going to classes, working, and then it always was like a massive amount of people around the food trucks to where I would never have the time to actually, buy from. But when I finally did towards the latter part of my senior year, it was really something. And also, add on to it, I remember hearing a story. One of the local news channels in Houston, something like that, and it took its own where PB&J like that, and I saw how massive the sandwich looked, and the chef was saying, well, I wanted to, get that nostalgia back about how you feel with eating a PB&J and making it, you know, go big or go home. And then the price of certain of it was like, what? I know, you want it's big, but doesn't equate for the price and everything. So I find it quite interesting with food trucks here. Alright, so with that said, the recipes that I would want to try from him is the curry coconut clam chowder. I would want to poppy style. He also infused Latin, Mexican style flavors in his food too, and that's another contribution of the gifts that America has given with infusing different cultures together in the food palette here. Alright, so I would want to try the grilled zucchini with blueberry and habanero salsa. That's interesting. And this double cheeseburger style. It's quite nice. And the Carlo Mira, I'll do my best to pronounce his name, Carlo Mira Chahi. 2011, he was deemed Best New Chef. Alright, so he was a forerunner in having chefs being presented in Brooklyn restaurants. And that's quite nice, because in Brooklyn it's pretty much like get in, get out kind of. That's not really much of an attribute to from what I understand. I haven't personally been to New York, but from what I understand, and then what I've been told by my husband, because at one point in time, and he's been to New York, so and then other people who have been friends and stuff that have been to New York, but that it's kind of, you just either get food to go or so, and then it's nice to a chef to want to have that opportunity for people to sit down and enjoy the experience of eating and have a chef there. Alright, so needless to say, what are some of the recipes I would want to try from him? I would want to try, the squid. That's what I would want to try. Because, to merge citrus, chili, and mint with squid. Yeah, now we're talking here. So that's on page 246. And I would want to also try the sea urchin linguine. Wow, 248. All right, so we're going to end with Eric Anderson and Josh Haberger. They were entitled Best New Chefs in 2012. Okay, so their contributions here. Now, they were trained in their culinary training is really up tier here, top notch here. Now, they gave a lot of their contributions after their training to the catbird seat. Alright, so in the parent companies, and in which and then with the process of reinventing the way in which you think about immersion between comfort foods, all different variety of foods too, but the catbird seat is where they really were able to showcase their fine talent. Alright, so needless to say, the recipes that I want to try here. The red curry squash, I would want to try that. And then also with the chorizo oil poached red snapper, I would want to try that. The hot chicken, and I would want to try that with the T-burn hot chicken. It's interesting merging those flavor palettes together. And There you go. Now, this reaches the end. So, my final thoughts on this here. Alright, so I would encourage y'all to check this book out. And then also I would encourage y'all to check out, if you're inclined to have the time to check out the list and from Food and Wine Best New Chefs. Because simply put, like that corner phrase, you are what you eat and you are what you don't eat. And I would say food really exemplifies the aspects of what that means. So, if you are a person who appreciate that there's so much cultural understanding behind food, and it's a staple in which you are representing value within something and heritage within something, then food is one of those venues to come across and to engage and talk and conversate and have ideas about. Because again, most of the time, when you are talking about food, it's a nice experience. It's a experience that people want to be a part of. And culture is greatly shaped by that too, either bad or good when it comes to these things. And then food is very pronounced in being one of them. Alright, with that said, I really enjoyed talking about this and giving my personal thoughts about food. And y'all want to continue the conversation, feel free to email me. The best way to do this is one, like I said, email. And of course, I appreciate the comments that I get on YouTube. And also, if you want me to feature your comments on my show, I will do that. And also, if you want to be a part of the show, you have something to say, you want to be on an episode on the show, I can also do that. Alright, so tune in, turn up, and definitely take care. Bye-bye for now.